Before you hear what happened, let me ask you this. How many times can someone overlook you before you start to disappear? I don't mean in the obvious way. Not like someone forgetting your birthday or walking past you in the grocery store. I mean in the small, silent ways. The way they change the subject when you speak. The way they smile like you're a joke they've heard before. The way they pat your hand when you're trying to scream. My name is Gloria Wren. I'm 61 years old. Mother. Sister. Former nurse. Current, well, ghost, I guess. At least, that's how I felt by the time this story began. For most of my life, I stayed in the background. I was the reliable one. The one who took the night shifts when no one else wanted them. The one who moved back home to take care of mom when the others were too busy. The one who always answered the phone, even at 2 a.m. And for years, that was enough. I never had a big life. I didn't marry. I didn't have kids of my own. I was too busy raising everyone else's. My younger sister, Vivian, always had the spotlight. She married well, had 2 children, moved to a gated neighborhood, and hosted themed dinner parties where the wine cost more than my weekly groceries. My brother, Leo, was the intellectual, traveled the world, taught anthropology, wrote books that got reviewed in magazines I couldn't pronounce. Me? I changed bedpans, gave flu shots, taught scared new moms how to swaddle babies in the ER at 3 a.m. I was proud of that. Still am. But they weren't. Not really. And maybe that's where the story really starts. It was my mother's 85th birthday. We were all supposed to gather at Vivian's new lakeside home in New Hampshire, her pride and joy. I'd been looking forward to it. I even bought a new dress. Plum-colored, soft, with a delicate hem I'd hand-stitched the night before. I painted my nails. I curled my hair. It was the first time I'd been out in weeks. Vivian had insisted on doing everything proper. Hired a catering company. Set up a big white tent in the backyard. Live band. Photo booth. Her kids were flying in. Leo was bringing his new girlfriend, a woman half his age with a podcast about silent retreats. I baked our mother's favorite cake. Lemon chiffon. From scratch. The way she liked it, real lemons, not bottled juice. I used the same cracked porcelain mixing bowl we'd had since I was 10. I arrived right on time, cake in hand, heart in throat. No one greeted me. Not Vivian. Not Leo. Not even Mom. They were too busy taking pictures near the lake. I walked through the house, shoes tapping against the marble floor, feeling like a stranger in a place where I used to belong. I found a spot on the far side of the tent and placed the cake on the dessert table. There were 3 other cakes, each taller, fancier, imported. One said, "From the Artisan Bakehouse," in gold lettering. Mine had no label. Just love. After a while, the speeches began. Vivian stood at the mic in her champagne dress, radiant and rehearsed. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate this incredible woman," she said, gesturing to Mom, who was smiling vaguely, already tired. She raised 3 children who've all made something of themselves. Leo, the explorer. Me, the organizer. And of course, she paused, searching the crowd like she'd forgotten. Gloria, someone whispered beside her. Right, Gloria. Vivian laughed, like it had slipped her mind. The heart of the family. Everyone clapped. I smiled tightly. The kind of smile you practice in mirrors when no one calls for days. Later, when it came time to cut the cakes, Vivian pointed to the Artisan Bakehouse one. "Let's slice this one," she said. "It's Mom's favorite." "No," I said, louder than I meant to. She always loved lemon chiffon. They blinked at me like I'd spoken in another language. Vivian tilted her head. "Oh, I don't think she remembers that." "I do," Mom said quietly. "Gloria always made it just right." Vivian hesitated, then gave a tight smile and waved toward mine. "Fine. Someone bring over the homemade one." The homemade one. That's what she called it. Not Gloria's cake. Not my sister's thoughtful gift. Just a category. An afterthought. The knife passed through my cake gently. The first slice held together beautifully. "I remember this," Mom said, taking a bite. "Tastes like home." Vivian laughed. "I guess nostalgia is a flavor now." Leo clinked his wine glass. It's very retro. They moved on quickly. To dancing. To selfies. To Rose. I sat alone near the back of the tent. I watched as guests devoured cakes they couldn't pronounce. Watched my siblings toast themselves. Watched my mother, tired and half forgotten again, settle into a chair in the corner. Then I looked down at my hands. At the calluses still there from years of work. At the dress I had sewn by hand. At the people I had loved more than they ever noticed. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I pulled out my journal, the one I'd kept locked in a drawer behind my old photo albums. I opened to a fresh page, and I began to write, not about the birthday party, not about the cake, but about everything before. The years of silence, the years of sacrifice, the years of being the family's foundation, and it's forgotten. And as the ink bled into the paper, I realized something. This time, I wasn't going to stay silent, because I had a story to tell, and they were finally going to hear it. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The first time someone asked me what I wanted, I didn't know how to answer. It was the next morning. I had barely slept. My mind buzzed with 1,000 memories, every one of them tinted in the same color. Being overlooked, being useful, but never seen. I was still in my plum dress, the hem wrinkled now from where I'd curled up on the living room couch, arms folded around my stomach like I could hold in the ache. And then the phone rang. It was Reese, Vivian's oldest, my niece, the only one in the family who ever really checked in outside of holidays or favor requests. She was 27 now, living in Chicago, working in tech, always too busy, but somehow never too busy for a 2-minute call to say, "Hey, Aunt Glo, just thinking of you." "Aunt Gloria," she said, voice low and careful. "I saw what happened yesterday. I'm so sorry." I didn't ask what she meant. I knew. The cake, the speech, the whole performance. "You didn't deserve that," she added. None of it. A pause. And then she asked the question, "What do you want?" It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't laced with pity. Just honest. And for the life of me, I didn't know what to say. Because no one had ever asked me that before. Not really. Not when Mom got sick and I moved back home. Not when Vivian got married and made me the default babysitter. Not when Leo started his lectures on how my life was simple and uncomplicated, like that was a compliment. I had always done what needed to be done, not what I wanted. I swallowed hard. I want to feel like I matter. The line went quiet. Then Reese said, "You do. You always have. But it's time they hear it from you." And just like that, a seed planted. Because maybe she was right. Maybe this family needed to hear me loud and clear, once and for all. The next week, I started going through boxes. Not of clothes. Not of junk. Of memories. Stacks of letters. Old photo albums. Journals. Birthday cards I'd kept even when no one kept mine. Recipes Mom handed down. Notes from the hospital where I worked for 30 years. A newspaper clipping from when I once delivered a baby in the back seat of a taxi. They called me the angel in scrubs. No one in the family even mentioned it. Every one of those pieces told a story. My story. And I realized something. They knew the version of me they needed, not the version that existed. They needed a Gloria who picked up the pieces, not one who painted pictures of a life she never got to live. I found an old manila folder marked 2001. Inside was a brochure for a painting retreat in Oregon. I had circled it in red ink. I was going to go. Had saved for it. But that was the year Vivian had her first baby, and I used the money to help with hospital bills and diapers. She never paid me back. Never even said thank you. I folded the brochure and stuck it in my purse. Maybe it wasn't too late. Then came the call that changed everything. "Vivian." I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Gloria," she said, "Mom wants to revise her will." That made me sit down. "She's been asking to move the house into my name. She says you've already got the lake cabin from Dad's estate, so she wants everything else to go to me." It's just easier this way. The cabin? The mold-ridden structure 3 hours from civilization that hadn't been usable since the roof caved in? That was my share? I don't think Mom's in the right headspace to make that decision, I said, carefully. She's fine, Vivian snapped. She's just forgetful sometimes. But I'm helping her stay on top of things. I knew what that meant. Vivian had started managing Mom's finances after her last fall. Told me it was a burden but never once asked for help. You're not even here, Gloria. You don't see how much I do. My jaw clenched. I gave up 10 years of my life to care for her. Vivian laughed. Actually laughed. Yeah, and we were grateful. But you chose that life. Don't make us pay for your martyr complex now. My hand tightened around the phone. No, I said, voice like steel. What I chose was my family. What you chose was power. And I'm done pretending that's the same thing. I hung up, and then I cried. Not because she hurt me. She had done that 1,000 times before. I cried because for the first time, I had stood up to her. And I didn't apologize. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I wrote a letter to Mom. I told her everything. Not out of anger. Not to guilt her. Just the truth. I told her how I'd used my savings to take care of the bills. How I skipped vacations, skipped relationships, skipped whole pieces of my life because I believed I was needed. I told her about the painting retreat, about the dreams I put on hold, about how I didn't regret helping, but I regretted never being seen for it. I didn't mail the letter. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't trying to please anyone. I was trying to heal. And healing doesn't always start with forgiveness. Sometimes it starts with telling your truth out loud and not flinching when it echoes back. Sometimes the people who owe you the most are the ones who act like you owe them everything. It was Thursday morning when I showed up at the lawyer's office. I didn't make an appointment. I didn't bring anyone with me. I walked in wearing my navy blue coat, the same one I'd worn to Vivian's first wedding, and the same one I wore to bury my father. The receptionist looked up, startled, but I smiled politely and said, "Tell Mr. Harrow I'd like to speak to him about my mother's estate. He'll want to hear what I have to say." 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man who had known our family since I was in high school. His hair was gray now, his glasses thicker, but his handshake still warm. Still cautious. "I take it this isn't a social visit," he said. I didn't waste time. "My sister's trying to move the house into her name." Without telling me, he sighed, removed his glasses. Vivian brought in a draft of the new will. "Your mother was with her." I assumed. "She doesn't understand what she's signing anymore," I said quietly. Vivian's guiding her hand. "And if you let this go through, she'll strip me of the only thing left that ties me to my father." He looked uncomfortable. "Good. Do you have documentation?" he asked gently. I reached into my purse and slid the manila folder across the table. Every hospital bill I paid. Every tax receipt. Every invoice for care supplies, food deliveries, even the chairlift installation I never once asked to be reimbursed for. His eyes moved slowly over the pages. "You did all this?" "For 10 years, I said. While she traveled. While she managed things from a distance. While she let everyone believe I was living rent-free like a freeloader when I was the one keeping the lights on." Silence. Then he said, "Thank you for coming in." And I knew I had made my first real move. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. It's quiet, precise, relentless, like the sound of a woman finally choosing herself. The next time Vivian called, I let it ring. And then I blocked her number. Not because I was angry, but because I was finally free. Or so I thought. Because betrayal has layers. And the next one came from someone I never expected. Leo. My baby brother. My protector. My ally. Or so I thought. It was late. I was sipping tea in the living room, flipping through an old recipe binder when a notification popped up on my phone. "Leo tagged you in a post." Curious, I tapped. It was a family photo. From years ago. Me, Vivian, Leo, Mom, and Dad at a picnic. I was holding a tray of sandwiches, my apron dusted in flour, smiling like someone who had no idea her future was being swallowed whole by obligation. But the caption? That was the real knife. To the women who kept us all going. Mom, and of course Vivian, the real backbone of the family. No mention of me. Not a word. I scrolled through the comments. Dozens of likes. Heart emojis. Praise for Vivian. Someone even wrote, "So lucky to have a sister like her. Gloria must be grateful." I stared at those words so long I forgot to breathe. Grateful? For what? Being erased? Leo and I had spent our childhood fighting off neighborhood bullies and watching each other's backs. I was the one who helped him pass senior English. I was the one who brought him soup when he got mono in college. I was the one who co-signed his first car loan. And now I was a footnote, a supporting character in someone else's highlight reel. I set my phone down, calmly. Then I opened the drawer where I kept the old photo albums. And I began writing. Not a letter, not a message, a list, a record. Every moment I showed up. Every moment I gave more than I got. Every moment I mattered, even if no one else noticed. Because I had finally realized, if they won't write you into the story, you write your own. The next morning I got an email from a woman named Teresa Jenkins. She was a board member for the local art gallery downtown. Said she'd come across a photo of one of my paintings on Reese's social media. A watercolor landscape I'd done years ago. Said it moved her. Said they were hosting a showcase for unsung creators, local artists with stories to tell. Would I be interested? I stared at the screen. I hadn't painted in 3 years. But I knew my answer instantly. Yes. Yes, I would. Because finally, I had something to say. And this time, the world was going to listen. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after you finally decide you're done being quiet. For me, that silence sounded like the first brushstroke on a fresh canvas. 3 years. That's how long my easel had collected dust in the back room. I used to paint at night, after Mom fell asleep, after the bills were paid, after everyone else's needs were met. But eventually, even that small piece of myself felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Now it felt like survival. I stood in my tiny studio, hands trembling slightly as I opened the old tin of watercolors. The colors had dried and cracked, but they were still there. Like me, weathered, but not broken. The first thing I painted wasn't beautiful. It wasn't supposed to be. It was a porch light. The one outside the Wren family home. The one I used to leave on for my father when he worked late shifts. The same one I turned off for the last time the night he died. I painted that light glowing in the dark. A quiet kind of beacon. And when I stepped back, I cried. Not from sadness. From recognition. I was still in there, buried beneath years of sacrifice and silence. The showcase was 2 months away. I had no plan, no collection, just a woman trying to paint her way back to herself. And somehow that was enough. Meanwhile, the calls started again. From Vivian. From Leo. From distant cousins who never remembered my birthday, but suddenly had opinions about the house, the money, the estate. I didn't answer any of them. But I listened to the voicemails. Vivian's were sharp. Gloria, what exactly are you doing? You're being emotional again. This affects everyone, not just you. Can we talk before you make a scene? Leo's were quieter. Sis, come on. You know how Viv gets. Just, let's not turn this into a war, okay? War? As if they hadn't already declared one the moment they decided to cut me out and smile about it over brunch. Still, I kept painting. 1 canvas became 3, then 5. Each one held a different piece of me. A broken teacup on a kitchen table, for the day Mom forgot my name. An empty chair facing a window, for every birthday I spent alone with a reheated casserole. A pair of worn hands, mine, holding a garden trowel, surrounded by wilted flowers that refused to die. I called the series Inheritance. Because that's what they had left me. Grief, guilt, and the resolve to become something more. The night of the gallery showcase, I almost didn't go. I stood in front of the mirror, wearing the only nice dress I owned, hair pinned back, heart pounding like a war drum. I looked at myself and whispered, "They don't get to decide your worth. Then I walked out the door. The gallery buzzed with conversation, wine glasses clinking, soft jazz playing in the background. I felt like a stranger in a world I had once only observed from the outside. But then something happened. People stopped in front of my work. They stood still. They cried. One woman touched the canvas of the porch light and whispered, "This was my childhood." Another man stared at the empty chair painting for 10 whole minutes before wiping his eyes and walking away. They didn't know my story, but they felt it. They saw me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a placeholder. I felt like the main character. Near the end of the night, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned, and there she was, Vivian. Hair immaculate, pearls around her neck, a glass of wine in one hand, and that tight smile she always wore when she wanted something. "I have to say, I'm impressed," she said, eyes darting around the room. "Didn't know you had this in you." I said nothing. She gestured to the crowd. "You really got people talking. Who knew your little hobby could turn into this?" My little hobby. I looked at her and smiled. Slowly. "This isn't a hobby, Viv. It's what's left after the rest of you took everything else." She blinked, momentarily stunned. Then laughed. Lightly. Dismissively. "Come on, Gloria. Don't be dramatic. We're family." "No," I said. "You're family with people who keep your secrets." I stopped qualifying the moment I told the truth. Her face changed, and I walked away. Because sometimes the boldest thing you can do isn't to shout. It's to live so fully that the people who tried to bury you have to watch you bloom. And I was just getting started. They say when you shake the tree, you'd better be ready for what falls. Well, I shook it. And what came tumbling down was everything they'd tried so hard to hide. The day after the gallery show, a reporter from the Vermont Voice called me. She'd seen the exhibit. She wanted to do a human interest story, a quiet woman with a loud brushstroke, she called it. She asked about the meaning behind the Inheritance series. Said the raw honesty moved her. I hesitated. Then I told her the truth. Not every detail, not the venom, not the betrayal, but enough. I told her I had cared for my mother while my siblings built lives that never included me. I told her about the forgotten birthdays, the doctor's appointments I went to alone, the nights I slept in a chair beside a hospital bed with no one asking how I was doing. I told her about the day I found out my name had been erased from the will. And I told her what I did after. She asked if she could include a photo of me with one of the paintings. I agreed. Then hung up the phone and didn't think much of it. Until the article dropped. The headline read, "The Daughter Who Stayed, Gloria Wren Turns Family Silence into Art That Screams." I almost dropped my tea when I saw it. The story went viral in our town, then out of it. People shared it, commented, messaged me, women saying, "This is my life." Caregivers thanking me for giving voice to their exhaustion. Strangers saying, "You made me feel seen." And right beneath it in the comment section, someone had written, "I went to high school with Gloria. Can confirm she's always been the one doing the heavy lifting while the others posed for the photos." I didn't recognize the name, but I smiled, because someone had noticed. Even then, Vivian didn't call. She didn't have to. Her silence roared louder than any voicemail ever could. But Leo did. I picked up this time. "Did you really have to air all that in public?" he asked. "No," I said calmly. "I got to. She's our mother, Gloria. That kind of thing, private stuff, doesn't belong in newspapers." "You mean the kind of private stuff like being cut out of her will after 12 years of taking care of her alone?" He exhaled slowly. "This isn't going away. People are talking." "Let them," I said. "They should have talked a long time ago." Later that night, I received a message request on Facebook from a woman named Judith Wren, my cousin, one of the few relatives who didn't show up to the funeral, or the birthday parties, or the hospital. But I remembered her. Sharp voice, kind eyes, always stayed neutral in the chaos. Her message read, "Gloria, I just read the article. I had no idea. If you ever want someone on your side from within the family, I'm here." I stared at the words for a long time, because for the first time since this war began, Someone in the Wren family tree wasn't asking for something. She was offering. The next day, I got a call from my mom's former estate attorney. A voice I recognized too well. He cleared his throat, unsure. "Miss Wren, I was just reaching out to discuss some developments regarding the will." "What kind of developments?" "There may have been some irregularities in the paperwork filed last year." "Signatures. Timing." My heartbeat slowed. "Irregularities. Are you saying the will might not be valid?" "I'm saying it's being reviewed. Officially." Vivian was going to implode. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I felt justice approaching. Quiet. Inevitable. That night, I returned to my easel. This time, I painted something different. Not grief. Not silence. I painted a cracked mirror. Fractured. Yes, but with one piece shining brighter than the rest. A woman's eye, staring back through the broken shards, steady and unflinching. I titled it Resilience. Because that's what happens when they try to write you out of the story. You start writing your own. Sometimes the loudest sound is the one no one's willing to hear. The day after I painted Resilience, the estate attorney called again. This time, his voice didn't wobble. "There will be a hearing," he said. "Vivian and Leo are contesting the article's accuracy and your role in your mother's care. They're claiming you exaggerated." I didn't flinch. "Good," I said. "Let them say it under oath." He paused. "You'll need to bring evidence. Documents. Statements. Anything that proves your involvement." I almost laughed. Because for 12 years, I'd been documenting everything. Not out of paranoia. Out of necessity. Receipts for medication I paid for. Bank transfers I made to cover bills. Schedules of doctor visits. Even the notebook I kept in my mother's handwriting, where she listed her favorite meals and thanked me for always cooking them. They thought I had nothing but memories. They forgot I had proof. I spent the weekend preparing. Stacked files. Printed emails. Photos. Text messages with timestamps. I printed the picture from the Vermont Voice article too, me standing next to the Inheritance series, expression calm but eyes burning. On Sunday night, I got a knock at my door. I opened it and found Leo on my porch. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Uneasy. He held a Tupperware container. "I brought chicken pot pie," he said, like we were still 10 and fighting over board games instead of a will. I stepped aside. He walked into the kitchen like a man stepping into enemy territory. We didn't speak until the kettle started boiling. Then he exhaled and said, "You always kept the house warm, even when we didn't visit." I said nothing, because no apology deserves a shortcut. He sat down at the table, hands folded like he was praying for something that had already passed. "I didn't know," he said softly, "about how bad things got with Mom. She never told us." "She didn't have to," I replied. "You never asked." He flinched. "Vivian, she was angry. She still is. She says you turned people against us." I stirred my tea. "I didn't turn anyone. I just stopped lying for you." He looked at me then. Really looked. "You loved her," he said. "More than any of us. That's why she leaned on you." I met his eyes. "And that's why she broke me." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She wrote this the week before she died. It wasn't in the will." I took it, hand steady. It was a letter. Crinkled, tear-stained. "Dear Gloria, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry. I don't know when I stopped seeing you as my daughter and started seeing you as a crutch. Maybe it was when your father left. Maybe it was when I got sick. But the truth is I leaned too hard. And I knew it. I wanted to make it right. I just ran out of time. You were always the strongest. That's why I hurt you the most. Love, Mom." I folded it gently, placed it beside my tea. Then I said something I didn't expect. "Thank you, Leo." He nodded, eyes red. And for the first time in years, we sat in the same room and didn't feel like strangers. But I knew better than to think Vivian would soften. She didn't show up at my door with a pie. She showed up at the courthouse with a statement. A cold, rehearsed one. She called me bitter, manipulative, obsessed with control. She said the painting series was a stunt for attention and claimed my story had damaged the family's reputation irreparably. I sat across from her, file in hand, voice calm. And when it was my turn, I spoke with no fear. I showed the receipts, the schedules, the photos. I read the letter aloud. The courtroom was silent. Even Vivian blinked. Her lawyer whispered something urgently, but she didn't respond. Because some truths echo louder than any defense. That night, I walked past the gallery downtown. My paintings were still hanging. A small crowd gathered by the window, staring. Someone pointed to one piece and said, "That's the one that changed everything." They weren't talking about family feuds or lawsuits. They were talking about me. I wasn't a footnote in someone else's story anymore. I was the story. And the pen was finally in my hand. There's a strange stillness that settles over a courtroom before the verdict is read. Not the kind of silence you get when people are polite. It's heavier than that. Like everyone's holding their breath at once, waiting for a sentence that might not come from the judge, but from life itself. I sat there in the front row, hands folded in my lap, next to a man I hadn't seen in 20 years, my brother, Leo. And across from us sat Vivian. Back straight, lips tight, expression unreadable. She hadn't spoken to me since the hearing. Not a glance. Not a word. Just silence sharpened like a blade. The judge's voice was steady as he read the final decision. Vivian's motion to have the article retracted? Denied. Her request to dispute my financial records? Overruled. The court acknowledged my contributions, documented care, and legal right to administer the estate as outlined. My name, officially and permanently, was left in the will. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was release. Like a window had been opened in a room I didn't realize had no air. After the gavel dropped, people stood, murmured, shuffled out. But I didn't move. Neither did Leo. We just sat there, the weight of years settling around us like dust. He turned to me finally and said, "You think she heard us, Mom?" I looked at him. "She heard us," I said. She just didn't know how to answer. Vivian didn't wait for anyone. She left before the bailiff could even finish the closing statement. But as she passed me, her arm brushed mine. And for just a moment, just a second, her hand dropped something into mine. I opened it after she was gone. A photograph. Old, worn, taped at the edges. It was me, Vivian, Leo, and our mother. We were standing in front of the old house, arms around each other, before the divorce, before the caretaking, before the fractures. On the back, in Vivian's handwriting, it said, "For what it's worth." I still remember the before. I didn't cry, but I did feel something loosen inside me. Maybe hate, maybe grief, maybe both. The next few weeks passed in a blur. The article gained traction again, this time nationally. Emails poured in, gallery offers, speaking invitations, even a book deal from a small independent publisher. I kept them all in a folder labeled later. Because before I could move forward, I had one more thing to do. I went back to the house. Not to reclaim it. To say goodbye. The rooms looked smaller somehow. The kitchen tile still cracked where Leo once dropped a ceramic bowl. The hallway still creaked in the exact same spot I used to tiptoe across when I was a kid sneaking midnight snacks. I walked into my mother's bedroom. The one I used to change her sheets in, brush her hair in, read to her when the words on her own pages blurred. And for the first time since she passed, I sat on her bed, closed my eyes, and forgave her. Not because she asked for it, but because I needed to let go. I whispered one final thing to the quiet air. "I hope you see now, Mom. I didn't want your house. I wanted your heart." On my way out, I left the keys on the mantel. Next to them, I placed something else. A framed version of the first painting in the Inheritance series. The one called Sacrifice. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. Anyone who saw it would know exactly who it belonged to. People always ask what you'd do if you finally got justice. They expect something cinematic. Fireworks. Champagne. A long, defiant monologue. But the truth? When I walked out of that courtroom with my name intact and my dignity restored, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind you feel when you've carried generations of silence and finally set them down. The weeks that followed weren't glamorous. I didn't go viral. I didn't land on magazine covers. I went back to my apartment. I painted. I went for walks in the cold morning air, let it sting my skin like a reminder. You're alive. I drank coffee at my tiny kitchen table and watched the steam curl upward like it was trying to carry all the unspoken things with it. I didn't talk to Vivian. Not because I was angry. Because for once in my life, I didn't need her permission to move forward. But she reached out. 2 months after the verdict, on a rainy Thursday, she knocked on my door. No makeup. No mask. Just Vivian, holding a faded red box in her hands. "This was Mom's," she said, her voice tight. "She wanted you to have it." I hesitated. Then opened the lid. Inside were letters. Handwritten. Dozens of them. Most addressed to me. Some unfinished. Some water-stained. Some angry. Others aching with words she never found the courage to say. "I don't know how to tell you I'm sorry without admitting I was wrong. You were always the strong one, Gloria. I thought I was protecting you. I wasn't. I was protecting my own shame." I read each one slowly, as if they'd disappear if I blinked too hard. I didn't cry. Not then. But when I looked up and saw Vivian, her eyes rimmed red, her shoulders no longer square, I realized something. We were both daughters of the same wound. Different scars. Same ache. I nodded once. She nodded back. That was enough. A few months later, I stood inside a quiet gallery in New Haven. My first solo exhibition. Inheritance, the series that changed everything. People filed in, whispered, gazed. But I kept near the back, until a girl, maybe 17, approached me with trembling fingers. "I read your story," she said. "My mom and we haven't spoken in 2 years. But your painting, the one called Buried Apologies." She swallowed. It made me want to call her. I smiled. Not big, just enough. Because that was why I told the story in the first place. Not for revenge. For release. For someone to look at pain and see themselves, and maybe see a way out of it. Years have passed since the courtroom. The world moved on. But I didn't fade with it. I started a workshop for women artists over 50. Taught them how to use pain as pigment. Painted every day. Not to escape, but to remember. I even turned the inheritance I kept, what was left of it, into a scholarship. For girls like me. Like I was. The invisible ones. And as for the last painting in the series, it hangs in my studio. A woman on a cliff, arms wide, wind in her hair, eyes closed, not in fear. In freedom. I called it the unforgotten. Because I am, and always will be. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own, if you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. You were never the problem. And you don't need permission to be whole again. If you're still here, standing, surviving, then you've already won. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart, and comment below where you're watching from. I read every one. Until next time, stay strong and stay seen.